Hello my lovelies, this is Tangi from Tangi's Cakery and welcome back to my channel. Today you're gonna watch me decorate a few cupcakes that we have here for Independence Day. It's 350 cupcakes altogether. This week was actually kind of a busy week for us. Usually we're used to getting about 200, let's say 200 per week, 200 cupcake orders per week, but this year we had over 1,000. So that's like 5 times over what we're used to. So I really had to improvise here because I do only have 3 standard cupcake pans. So I spent some long nights in this kitchen of ours. Gladly I had enlisted the help of my partner here. So yeah, we're gonna decorate these cupcakes, and I'm gonna share some tips of how to start and run a small baking business, and how to, stay consistent and hopefully grow it to a level where you really be proud of yourself. So tip number 1, when you start out with home baking, you really don't have a lot of equipment to use, and sometimes this will force you to be more, creative with the things that you do have on hand. So you have to think out of the box a lot of the times. You have to be creative and then just use what you have on hand. Like my first rolling pin was literally a wine bottle. I used a wine bottle to roll out my fondant. It wasn't easy, it was hard, it was uneven, but it's what was there and it's what I used. So when I started out, I didn't have cutters. I had to cut things out by hand. It just makes you grow as a baker and as a thinker as well. So that's definitely one of the best tips I could definitely give you. Tip number 2 is to perfect your recipe or recipes that you'll be using for your cakes. When you're starting out, it's a little bit confusing to choose a recipe that you really like or a recipe that you'd like to stick to when you're giving your clients a cake. So I would suggest that you find a recipe that you like. Even if you don't like it 100%, tweak it and use that recipe and stick to it, because if you keep changing your recipe up, you won't really know where you are as a baker, because you'll start getting the feedback you'll get from your clients will kind of confuse you, and you won't know what to do. You won't know what recipe you use for which client. It's just a confusing thing. It's just nice to have one standard recipe that you could keep using over and over again, so that your feedback is reliable and your results are also reliable. Don't be afraid to come up with new recipes on your own and then sticking to those ones too, because that's what I did. I had a standard recipe that I'd found on the internet, and then I also had another recipe that I'd gotten from someone, and then I kind of merged the two to make the recipe that I use now. So that's one tip to keep in mind. This leads us into tip number 3. It kind of ties in together with the whole recipe thing, but tip number 3 is to find a way to make your work easier for yourself. Find a way to make work faster for yourself. So standardize everything. That's what these big companies do. They standardize everything so that they know exactly how much time they're spending on what, and they plan better that way. I use my own cake mix that I came up with after years and years of trial and error. This is the cake mix that I use for all my recipes, all my flavors. Okay, most of them. Let me not say all, but most of them. And I've stuck to it all these years. I don't change it, and it's way faster. I know exactly how much time it takes. I know my measurements out of my head. I don't have to worry about the baking part of cake making at all. The only thing I want to worry about is decorating, and trust me, that keeps me up at night enough. I don't need other trivial things keeping me up at night about measurements and stuff. I don't want that. And it's also easy to outsource the work. So if I really busy, I could always ask somebody to help me out. And because I've standardized everything, I just give them the recipe and be like, okay, help me do this, and it's almost foolproof. Tip number 5: what to do when you don't have orders. There's just one answer to that: practice. Practice all the techniques that you aren't really good at yet. I personally cannot pipe to save my life. It's my kryptonite. I do not like piping at all, and I always try to avoid cakes that required me to pipe. But then one day I was just like, but why? Just practice more. And I practiced, and yeah, I didn't get much better, but it's passable. I can actually make a cake, pipe on it, and it would look decent because my piping was horrendous at the beginning. So I'm still learning about that. So if you have certain things that you're kind of weak at when you don't have orders, practice those techniques. Tip number 6 is about getting your work out there. Yes, you should have an Instagram page, Facebook page, social media, like the whole shebang. But the most important thing that I noticed, especially in my baking career, was word of mouth. People were happy with my work, which is why they recommended me to their friends and family. And that's the number one thing. Even till this day, whenever I ask somebody, oh, where did you hear about Tangi's Cakery? They'll mostly be like, no, you made my sister's cake. Oh, you made my sister-in-law's cake. Something like that. So word of mouth is number 1 for me, like at the moment. Tip number 7 is that you shouldn't waste your money on equipment that you probably only use every once in a while. I have wasted so much of my hard-earned money just buying things that I thought I'd use because I thought they'd look nice. But I have like buckets and buckets of cutters and impression mats and all that I never even got to use. And every time I look at those buckets, it hurts because that's a lot of money. Equipment for caking and decorating, it's expensive. It's not cheap, and especially if you have to buy them, like if you have to buy a little thing for each and every cake, you will end up broke. So learn to improvise and find a way. Get cutters from friends or something, or cut them out free-handedly if you're really good at that, or rent them out. I know there's some shops out there that rent out their equipment so that you don't have to spend all that money on something you're only going to use once. Tip number 8 is to find a way to supplement your income. Making cakes can be profitable, but sometimes it's kind of an inconsistent flow of income. So when you're not sure about when your next order will come, you should have a way to supplement. Say for instance, maybe you sell cookies on the side, or you sell donuts, or whatever you can make from your house. Kids love these little things that they can just buy, especially if you live in a high traffic area, or you live in a community with a lot of kids that like sweet things. Sell those little things, those little treats that they don't get to buy if they go to just any shop. Be creative. Tip number 9 would be to work as if you're being watched. This is a rule I always follow. This is to avoid any instances of people getting sick or getting bad cake. That is a nightmare to deal with. So you always work as if somebody's watching you. That means work cleanly, work neatly, wash your hands often. If you touch your phone, you have to wash your hands. If you touch anything that's not your cake or whatever it is you're working on, you have to wash your hands. Don't be speaking all over your work. Pretend you're in a lab somewhere and you have to be careful with everything. That's a way to avoid serious problems later on, especially like if you don't work cleanly, someone might get sick and you don't want that. When I work on my cakes, I always like to tell myself that no, I wouldn't want my family eating something that's not clean. So why should I give that to other people? So I try my bestest to work as cleanly as I can. My final tip would be for you to learn how to take criticism. It's hard for people when somebody says something bad about their work, especially considering the amount of time and effort that goes into making a cake. It's not as easy as most people think it is. So it does sting when somebody comes and criticizes your work, but you should always take that as a step towards growth. Try to ask and communicate with your client. Ask them what it is they didn't like and how you could make it better, and then offer them something like something to ease their worries and something to ease their minds, something to make them feel better about you, or to prove yourself to them that whatever had happened was just probably a mistake. Let's say your cake wasn't completely done in the middle. Don't go off and say, no, it's just what. Like, I know people that actually get angry and then want to blame the client, but sometimes you just have to be self-aware, take accountability, and make it up to the client. The client, let's say 9 times out of 10, they'll understand if you just explain to them that no, baking is finicky. Sometimes these things happen. I can make it better. Here's a discount on your next order, or here's some free cupcakes, or here's whatever you and the client decide. Just learn to take criticism and don't get mad at your clients for being honest. All feedback is good feedback. So I hope these tips have been helpful and that you take them and use them in your journey to starting a business, and good luck.